Have you ever wondered how lucky we are that some prehistoric animal species became extinct? Just look at what a piranha looked like 10 million years ago. It was 10 times the size of its modern descendants and comparable to the height of an average 12-year-old child. Scientists had no difficulty in modeling the appearance of this ancient fish because its remains are perfectly preserved in the limestone deposits of South America. This means we can examine the creature's real structure down to every bone. But not all prehistoric monsters were found like that. Some archaeologists have to restore the appearance of ancient animals just by their bone fragments, so some extinct dinosaurs could have looked much different than the textbook pictures. And the size of the individuals we consider real giants could have been much smaller, or vice versa. So, what was the most giant prehistoric monster? In our minds, most herbivores are really cute and harmless, but what prehistoric vegetarians looked like millions of years ago is simply terrifying. And 70 million years ago, the weirdest of them was the Dinocyrus. It was a two-legged dinosaur whose claws and teeth were so sharp that scientists couldn't decide whether there was any chance it was a predator. Moreover, this specimen was even more frightening than its relatives because the Dinocyrus had the longest forelimbs among all other bipedal dinosaurs. Long debates about what it looked like and what it ate arose from the dubious modeling of the dinosaur's appearance. You see, it was based only on the two arm bones found. In fact, the Dinocyrus could have looked like absolutely anything. At first, scientists mistook this animal for a carnivorous dinosaur and dubbed it Dinocyrus mirificus, meaning unusual, horrible hand in Greek. But since 1965, when archaeologists found these bones in Mongolia, various scientists couldn't confirm or disprove their hypothesis for almost 50 years. This might be news to you, but paleontologists not only have to brush off the sand from ancient bones, but actually fight over dinosaur remains. Scientists conduct entire investigations because black market fossil dealers, yes, they exist, often find historically significant bones before they do. And as it turned out, parts of the Dinocyrus skeleton were smuggled from the excavation site in Mongolia and sold through Japanese and German intermediaries to private European collections. Paleontologists had to spend tons of money to buy back the skull and foot. And when in 2014, researchers assembled a complete skeleton, they discovered that the Dinocyrus was actually a herbivorous ornithomimosaurian, a bird-like lizard. This became clear from the bones at the end of the tail. They were fused into a single structure called the pygostyle, which supports the tail feathers in modern birds. The Dinocyrus couldn't fly. It looked like an ostrich, but if it were 4 times bigger. The Dinocyrus was the largest dinosaur of its species. Its length was 11 meters. In addition to the strange paws, it also had a sail along its back, a broad beak, and giant 20-centimeter claws. Yeah, it looks really creepy, although it's hard to call it an absolute monster. Although the Dinocyrus was as big as the Tyrannosaurus, it couldn't move fast and bite because it was quite fat, and its long duck face had no teeth. So the Dinocyrus fed on soft plants and algae. Yet it's likely that even this appearance of the dinosaur, carefully restored from the remains, is still not final. In fact, the Dinocyrus was not the only giant member of its species that looked strange. For example, look at the largest hadrosaurid taxon called the Shantungosaurus. Fossils of its species, existing about 80 million years ago, were found in China, and in that case, the skeletons were perfectly preserved. They even had imprints of skin and internal organs. so its appearance could be restored to the smallest detail. In terms of its size, the Shentungosaurus was like 4 rhinos because its length reached as much as 17 meters. The features of the Shentungosaurus include 5-fingered webbed hands with thick supporting pads, a sail on its back, and a long, wide beak. Other ancient animals were lucky that such a giant didn't have powerful jaws and fangs, although there were about 1,400 tiny chewing teeth on the inside of its cheeks. But it used these small blades only to grind tree branches and pine needles. Even though the Shentungosaurus didn't eat meat, this titan still looks terrifying. Now imagine the same monster, but twice as large. That's what long-necked dinosaurs like the Titanosaurus, Brontosaurus, Apatosaurus, and Brachiosaurus looked like. They were all somewhat similar, but differed in body size, head shape, and neck length, which paleontologists determined by the found vertebrae. But sometimes they just made scientists more confused. That's what happened when they examined the remains of the Diplodocus, the largest long-necked dinosaur that lived 145 million years ago. At first, scientist David Gillette thought that this dinosaur could attain a maximum length of 54 meters, and then it turned out he had miscalculated the vertebrae. And in the end, it became clear that the size of the Diplodocus was much smaller. The dinosaur reached only 35 meters. But even with this length, the Diplodocus remains the record holder among herbivores. Imagine 6 giraffes lying on their sides. That's exactly the length of this dinosaur. Its neck alone was 8 meters long. I'm scared to even imagine the appearance of the Ehrenbergiana, the largest member of the pterosaur family, because its portrait was compiled based on just one bone. Scientist Camille Ehrenberg decided it was part of a giant dinosaur wing. That fossil reached 60 centimeters, and that's quite a lot considering that a wing consists of at least 4 similar bones. However, researcher Douglas Lawson insisted that the bone was a cervical vertebra. Even though the controversy is still ongoing, various websites, textbooks, encyclopedias, and movies depict the Ehrenbergiana as a pterosaur with a wingspan of 14 meters. But what if Douglas was right and the found bone was actually a cervical vertebra? It may even have looked like the flying Diplodocus. Then, this pterosaur could be 10 times bigger than it's depicted now. After all, the Ehrenbergiana would need a larger body to hold such a neck on its shoulders. It's hard to imagine what predator would venture to hunt that beast. Especially since, at that time, carnivores didn't surpass some herbivores in size, but that didn't stop them from being real killers. Scientists still can't understand why most people consider the Tyrannosaurus to be the main maniac killer of prehistoric times, while many other extinct carnivores were no less intimidating. For example, the Allosaurus, which lived 155 million years ago in the same area, was also very similar to the T-Rex. The Allosaurus also walked on its 2 hind legs, had a massive skull on a short neck, a long tail, and reduced forelimbs. Some individuals could be as long as 12 meters, which is like 2.5 alligators. The Allosaurus was distinguished by crests above the eyes, along the lateral margin of the nasal bone, and on the back of the skull, except they weren't as big as those of the Spinosaurus, whose name even translates as spine lizard. It lived 95 million years ago in South Africa. At first, paleontologists found only a fragment of its upper jaw, 19 teeth, and 13 vertebrae. In 1936, researcher Ernst Stromer, who discovered those remains, tried to reconstruct the dinosaur's appearance. According to the paleontologist, the Spinosaurus could walk upright and keep its balance thanks to its long tail, and the dinosaur itself reached 14 meters in length. And that's like 9 modern-day iguanas, which bear a certain resemblance to the Spinosaurus. But almost 80 years later, scientists Nizar Ibrahim, Paul Sereno, and Cristiano del Sasso claim that the ability of the Spinosaurus to walk on 2 legs with that physique is just incomprehensible. The researchers collected enough remains to create the most accurate illustration possible. Thus, we learned that the Spinosaurus center of gravity was actually pushed forward. This allowed the dinosaur to keep its balance and, most interestingly, enabled it to move through water. That discovery changed the whole picture. The new data helped to find out that the dinosaur's skull shape was also different from Stromer's drawing. In fact, the Spinosaurus head was long and narrow, as in modern crocodiles. But the primary features of its appearance, recognized by all scientists, were its neural spines. They formed a kind of sail on its back and grew to almost 2 meters. The sail is believed to have performed the same function as the hump in camels, thermoregulation. But even the Spinosaurus wasn't the most dangerous of all ancient giant predators. The true leader is the Gigantosaurus. It also closely resembled the Tyrannosaurus, but the Gigantosaurus lived long before it, 100 million years ago. The dinosaur was described by paleontologist Rodolfo Coria in 1995 from an almost complete skeleton. The body length of the largest specimen was over 13 meters. It had no spines, but there were crests above its nose and eyes. The Gigantosaurus was also notable for its elongated skull and teeth, which were even larger than those of the Tyrannosaurus and arranged in 2 rows. In addition, the Gigantosaurus had longer forelimbs. Basically, it looked like a T-Rex that had collected all the most terrifying external features of the other giant prehistoric predators. But since only about 70% of the Gigantosaurus skeleton had been preserved, some scientists believe the dinosaur could reach even larger sizes. When dinosaurs lived, there was more oxygen on Earth, allowing animals to literally become giants. But the most enormous extinct creature was neither the Diplodocus nor the Gigantosaurus. That colossal monster lived in the prehistoric ocean. Do you remember the prehistoric piranhas? Now, try to imagine the most common ancient fish. You won't believe it, but even they looked scarier and bigger than modern sharks. Take at least the Dunkleosteus. This extinct genus of large armored jawed fish terrorized the underwater inhabitants of subtropical seas 382 million years ago. They were called armored because of their extra hard foreheads. This fish didn't even need teeth to hunt because its jaw plates served as massive self-sharpening blades. The creature measured 10 meters long, which is 3 times the size of an average modern shark. But since paleontologists have only found the head of the fish, the rest of its body could look nothing like it's depicted. So, Ohio paleontology graduate student Russell Engelman decided to compare the proportions of the Dunkleosteus armored head with the skulls of hundreds of living and fossil fish. Thus, he concluded that the Dunkleosteus most likely reached a maximum length of 4 meters and was more like a fat tuna than a slender shark. Even though the Dunkleosteus wasn't that gigantic, it didn't exclude the fact that the fish's grip was deadly. Now, imagine what sharks may have looked like in prehistoric times. The weirdest one looked like a chainsaw killer and was called the Helicoprion. It terrified the underwater world of the North American coast 290 million years ago. The fossil remains of this fish's jaws are something like a serrated whorl consisting of 150 sharp teeth folded into a spiral. The Helicoprion could use it to literally saw the flesh of its prey. The world of modern animals has no analogs of such a jaw, and today's living sharks, compared to the Helicoprion, look like some helpless salmon, which is 3 times smaller than its ferocious ancestor. Yep, that's exactly the description of the giant prehistoric fish compiled by paleontologists from the fossils of the whorl. But there was absolutely nothing else, neither the head nor the rest of the skeleton bones. Don't you think this fossil looks much more like a shell? Perhaps it's just a no less weird species of mollusk with sharp growths on its shell that prevented predators from swallowing it. But the helicoprion is not the only prehistoric shark whose appearance has been reconstructed from just several fragments. We have a similar situation with the megalodon, the ocean king living 20 million years ago. Paleontologists were dumbfounded when they found its jaws measuring almost 3 by 3.5 meters. They're still the most enormous shark jaws in history. But in addition to teeth, researchers also found spinal vertebrae. They help calculate the estimated length of the individual, and it's a whopping 15 meters. To feed itself, the megalodon hunted dolphins and even whales. Initially, many reconstructions depicted it as an enlarged version of the great white shark because scientists have long thought they were related. But new research has determined that this predator actually belonged to another shark genus, the last member of which was the megalodon itself. Unlike the great white shark, it had a shorter nose and a flat, as if crushed, jaw. What creature could possibly be more horrible? The mosasaur. This monster dominated the ocean 70 million years ago. If the megalodon was the king of the prehistoric ocean, the mosasaur was Satan. Its length reached 18 meters, and that's like 7 monitor lizards, which, by the way, are descendants of this reptile. Mosasaurs had snake-like bodies with giant skulls and long snouts, and their flipper-like limbs enhanced the predator's coordination in water. Mosasaurs ate the same things as the megalodon and could even resort to cannibalism. After all, to satisfy their appetite, they needed a large amount of meat, which could sometimes only be found in other mosasaurs like themselves. Most of the marine animals we know today probably wouldn't exist if the mosasaur had survived to this day. They wouldn't stand a chance against this predator. In prehistoric times, giants were abundant on land and in the water. But now it's time to find out who is the true king of the titans. Let's imagine an island with all the largest extinct animals gathered together and see how their day unfolds. The Diplodocus is chewing ginkgo leaves near the ocean shore as usual. It doesn't even look around. This ancient lizard isn't afraid of any predators. And no wonder, because it would take not just 1 or 2 tyrannosaurs to attack such a giant. Moreover, the Diplodocus may turn out to be even bigger than described by scientists and reach a length of 55 meters. Such a threatening appearance scares away predators as they're much smaller in size, but not the Gigantosaurus. If scientists miscalculated, for example, the number of its vertebrae, it might be slightly smaller than the Diplodocus. Now, a predator almost as tall as the Diplodocus is watching the massive herbivore from behind tree branches. Despite its enormous size, this dinosaur is quite agile and can reach speeds of 50 kilometers per hour. So, it swiftly bursts out of the thicket and catches the Diplodocus by surprise. The Diplodocus immediately goes on the defensive. The Diplodocus has a very long and flexible tail, so it flicks the Gigantosaurus several meters away with a single blow. But the Gigantosaurus doesn't give up either. Although the 3-toed limbs of the Gigantosaurus appeared small in proportion to its body, they were more than muscular enough and equipped with 3 sharp claws each. Therefore, the Gigantosaurus chooses the tactic of wearing down. It scratches the Diplodocus, then lunges at it with an open mouth, biting the flesh of the herbivorous reptile with its serrated teeth. The Diplodocus is slowly losing strength as the entire beach shore is soaked in its blood. Suddenly, the Mosasaurus jumps out of the water. With a swift movement, it grabs the neck of the Gigantosaurus with its jaws and drags it to the bottom. The Gigantosaurus resists, thrashing and trying to bite the Mosasaurus, but the latter holds the predator in a death grip, and there's no chance of escape. The Diplodocus, although injured, survives. And now, in the thicket, a long neck is visible. Perhaps it's a relative of the animal coming to its aid. But it's not. This long neck belongs to the Eremborgiana, the same dinosaur whose bone still confuses scientists. And if it turns out to be part of its neck rather than its wing, the Eremborgiana could look almost like the Diplodocus relative. Suddenly, it attacks the wounded reptile. If scientists misidentified its bone, they could also have been wrong about its diet, mistaking a carnivorous reptile for a herbivorous one. Several Eremborgianas gather around the dying Diplodocus, pecking at its flesh like scavengers. Unfortunately, we haven't yet been able to reconstruct the appearance of the extinct titans with 100% accuracy. Many of them could be very different from how we imagine them. But someday, we may find out which animal could defeat the Mosasaurus itself, the giant Spinosaurus, or maybe a mollusk with spikes on its shell. What do you think? Write in the comments.